We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get started. We have some people online and I wanted to thank everybody that came here in person today for our nuts and bolts. This month we have our appraisal panel. That's always been one of our favorite nuts and bolts every month. We send them a list of tough questions that you guys have compiled and we send to them. This year we're working with Jason Cullum. Paula Mitchell, right? Yeah, Paula Mitchell and Frank Leader. They'll be asking questions, answering the questions that we're gonna ask them. So, you guys ready to get started?
Yeah.
I'll try not to have my questions too hard for you.
Done this a few times.
So we're gonna start out talking about basements. So what is the importance of putting all the details in the MLS about a basement, and why is the square footage of the basement so important?
Okay, so the reason that is because Fannie Mae is the biggest player on the secondary mortgage market. They dictate a lot of the things that we do in an appraisal. They create our form. They require that we take above grade improvements and separate them from the below grade improvements on a second line. Now, for real estate agents, you're including everything in your room count and your square footage, as long as it's contiguous and it's heated and cooled. When we use that as a comparable, we're going to have to separate those pieces out. So it's why we put the blurb in the MLS several weeks ago. If you could write a line that says something like 1,248 square foot basement features den with fireplace, rec room, bedroom, half bath, laundry room, we can take that, subtract it from what you have in the total MLS, and we can pull those apart. Because over the years, and Paul attest, it's difficult when we call and all it says in there is that square footage includes basement, but there's nothing else in there. Because the tax records are not going to give us any information, maybe the size of that basement. And so we have to separate it out. And you're probably not going to remember the square footage of that basement when I call you 3 months after the sale, you're in the car and you don't have the file with you. So it would speed things up. Basements are almost one of the most difficult things to do, certainly in Fayetteville over the years. For that reason alone, we just can't get that in. We're trying to do apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and the MLS doesn't have that kind of detail in it. So we'd appreciate that.
And you know, I just did one over in College Lakes, and that's a very good example because they have those tri-levels where you have one little corner on the inside usually that is below grade. And in that instance, I don't recognize that lower level. It's not accepted in the market as basement. And that one where it's a tri-level and you've got one corner, you don't really have to worry about it because that selling is above grade square footage. But if you have to go down steps and go down and you've got one whole wall that's below grade, that has to be a basement. And you have to let us know, because it's like when I was doing, I've had 2 basements in the last couple of weeks, and the second one, I had to go into the tax office and look and see, and they had 852 square feet in basement. And I had to pull that out. And it's like, well, is it all finished? You have to guess at the rooms. And then it's like, then they call and say, well, I didn't get value. And it's like, well, look at what I had to work with. You know, we can only, what you put in is what comes out. The more you put in, the better off we can do our job. Because there's no question, well, does it have a real patio back there, or is it just a little 5 by 5 square where you walk in and out the door? You know, is it really a porch, or is it a 5 by 5 covered entry in the front that you can't even put a chair on?
So sticking with the basement concept, how do you value an unfinished basement of a residential property, such as just the concrete floor, cinder block? They do have electrical outlets out there. How is that value put in? Is there a reasonable percentage that you should give it based on the square footage value of the home?
I look at the quality of the original house. You know, if it's a very good quality house for unfinished basement, I might do $10 a square foot. If it's a 1,100 square foot ranch that's just a regular house, I might not do but $5 a square foot, because it really, it's just storage. It's no different than having, except that you can get to it from inside. When you go into finishing basements, that's a different ball game. We go through and do figure a lot of different things there. It's still adjusted on a lower amount because it's less desirable. But that's how I do it. Jason?
Yeah, that's pretty close. And I looked at the questions last night, and if it's, most of those unfinished basements I see are essentially a very small storage area. And I would look at that as almost the same thing as a detached storage building or something. A lot of times it ends up being about, for me, about $500. When you start to get into hay mountains, some larger ones, but not, probably I haven't gone more than $1,000 for something like that for a regular unfinished basement. Because as Paul says, a lot of times the mechanicals are down there. It's unfinished storage. It's really not, livable area for you anyway.
Yeah,
And it might be open to the crawl space,
Yeah.
you've been down in those. And
Yeah.
where You get down
And it's
there,
like-
the water heater's there, the furnace is there, and then it's completely open to the crawl space.
We started to look at that stuff as like, what's the utility of it?
yeah.
Rather than square footage
And-
and the size of it or whatever, is what you really can you do?
Yeah, and I did one over in Gates 4 a few years back, and it had a full finished basement, and it was a nice house in the basement. It was walkout on one side, and that got very good value, but I still had to break it out, which was a freaking nightmare.
Yeah, a lot of times it makes, it's Fannie Mae's rules, a lot of times it makes what would have been a very clean appraisal. I had great comps, they were all had basements and they were all, when I used to work out in Pinehurst. And now you make me pull these things apart, and then it really looks bad with adjustment percentage and stuff, because I've had some where it was 1.5 baths were downstairs, so it looks like you're a 2-bedroom, 1 bath upstairs, but you really have 2.5 baths. And so it looks really weird.
Yes,
It's Fannie Mae's rules, we just live in their world.
yes.
Yeah.
So talking about the unfinished stuff kind of goes to the next question here is, what are we seeing is, when will we see the value go up in bathrooms, garages, et cetera? For example, someone was speaking with a builder and the builder told them that they cannot even pour the concrete for $3,000 for a garage, much less the framing and electrical expense of the garage, but yet the appraisal value was only $3,000.
Yeah, I'd like to take that one. It comes back to a very common mistake that people make. Market value is not cost. If you think about it, the best example I give folks all the time is a swimming pool. Joe goes out and buys himself a $100,000 house, and then he puts a $20,000 swimming pool in the
Or
backyard.
50,000.
Or 50,000 now. Is it straight math? 100 plus 50, the house now should sell for 150,000? Anybody that says yes doesn't understand the difference between market and cost.
Yes,
Now, a $3,000 adjustment that they mentioned in the question that came through from the internet, was that an adjustment from another property that they looked at? In which case, hey, if the other property had, 2 garages or a carport, maybe a $3,000 adjustment in that subdivision was about where the market is, okay?
I mean, it may be that somebody had a 3-car over here and everybody else has got 2. That,
yeah.
when you look at the difference in prices and what they sell for, it's not that great because it's again a swimming pool. I didn't want that 3rd-car garage. I'm not gonna pay for it. Even though that may be the only reason they're looking at that house. They're not gonna be honest. We know what buyers do. And it's just like, I did a house one time, and these people said they had a beautiful yard. And said, we spend all of our time out here. Are you gonna give us credit for this? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, why not? I said, because half of the people will walk away because they don't want to work in the yard every day.
Their landscaping is too much for them.
And it's the same thing. You got a 3rd-car garage. Well, God, I could have put a nice little home garden right where that's at.
Yeah.
It doesn't suit everybody, therefore you give it a somewhat of adjustment to recognize it's there, but if you price everybody out of the market, your house will never sell if you were to give it full value.
And appreciation has something to do with it too, because in new construction, I'd probably make larger garage adjustments because they're paying per garage, and I've talked to the builders, when you start to get into a neighborhood that's already established, then we start to see, you've got houses with 2-car garages versus a single garage versus a carport, and you're gridding all these comps, and after you're doing kind of the things square footage, you start to see this is what somebody's going to pay for.
Mhm.
And it's almost the same thing we would do in condition too. You're trying to have your updated. You want to have at least one updated similar sale. Maybe you've got one that's not been updated and you have a comparison between those two, and that's where you get that adjustment. Because people will ask, well, how much do you give for a remodel kitchen? Depends on what the comps say that they'll pay for that.
Well, and two, it's like, if the house is 5 years old, well, is that not personal preference rather than a renovation? You know, if it's 5 years old, it doesn't usually need new granite countertops or new cabinets or new
It's hard to
flooring.
explain to
So-
agents that you don't necessarily, it depends on the market. We got into the height of COVID and it showed I was making less condition adjustments because people were paying almost the same thing for the older appliances. I just want a house so bad, I'll just take it. And they were paying almost, and so the market tells us they're not paying $12,000 more for the remodeled kitchens and baths and stuff like. When we get back into a normal market, you start to see it. They start to pull back apart.
Yeah.
Now people have a little more of a selection. I want the house that's
It's
updated.
not as much as a.
I'm willing to pay for the updated house and I'm not gonna pay as much, and I have to go to Lowe's and put all new appliances and stuff in this house. So you see in a normal market, you will see that easily, but height of COVID was just a different animal altogether.
Yes, because I did a condo 2 weeks ago and they'd gone in and completely redone the kitchen. Well, they put cabinets, they put everything in it. And then they expected to sell their condo for $20,000 higher than anything else in the whole. And it's like, the house, the rest of them had granite countertops they put in, but they didn't change the cabinets. There was nothing wrong with the cabinets, except these people wanted these special cabinets. And it's like, if you're gonna stay in a house for a number of years, you can go ahead and pretty much do what you want because you figure you will reap the benefits of your expenses over time. If you're gonna turn it around in 2 years, or you know the military is gonna leave you in 3, everything you do, you don't have time to appreciate and get your money back from what you're doing. You need to look at a long-term thing, and we should be educating our sellers on this, that no, don't put granite in just because you're selling it. Sell it like it is and let the new people pick their own. How many times you walked in a house and they just put new granite in, and it's the ugliest thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's like, that hurts.
Right, it can be instead of, since they don't have time to recoup the value of the expense they're putting in. Jason, you brought up COVID. Have a question. Are appraisers still doing a lot of drive-by appraisals, or are they actually going into the home?
No, I haven't done a drive-by in a long time. If I get a drive-by now, it typically has been, you can tell it's pre-foreclosure.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bank probably already owns it.
Well, even during COVID, I think I only did one that I did.
I did a lot during COVID and up until late July of 2020, Fannie Mae had given directives and a big addendum that we put in appraisal. We were doing desktops for just like they were full appraisals, almost like went out of but we had to use MLS photos for everything, interior, exterior, and if you didn't have enough information, a front and rear photo or whatever, you'd have to tell them, look, there's just not enough information for me to be able to do a drive-by. But I think that sunsetted right around July 30th of 2020, and we went back in. But I talked to a national client and I wanted to ask them, how many appraisers won't go into a house? And it was a large percentage. They said, we have a lot of appraisers that will not do interior inspections right now, which was just like, and I didn't have a problem doing them because most of them were empty or the people would leave or something like that. And I was like, so I got a ton of them because not a lot of appraisers would take.
Yeah, but you're right, they're gone away.
But yeah, by the end of 2020 and that fall, it was almost back to normal. I mean,
Okay.
for us.
All right. So when you guys get the appraisal, when it comes to, what is the process that you guys go through to come up and determine what all are the steps? And I know there's a lot of steps and you won't be able to go into detail with all of them, but what is an overview of what you do once you get assigned an appraisal?
Oh, boy. You realize there's just like 1,500 hours for someone to be a trainee. And then there's like, when I went through it, you had 2 years as a trainee between when you first got licensed as a trainee and you could sit to become a full appraiser. Okay. Bring that down to 30 seconds.
So basically, when you get an appraisal, it's assigned to you from the bank.
Yeah.
What are the steps that you go
Okay,
through?
the first thing I do is pull the MLS sheet, look at any pictures. And anything I can find out about the house. Even if it sold 5 years ago, I print out that MLS sheet because I have something to work with. Then I go to the tax office and I pull all the tax documents, get the taxes, get the tax card. Then I go back to the MLS and I start searching for homes.
So one of the things I heard, and I want to make sure you say it again for all the brokers listening, is pictures. You guys have brought that up on a couple things from basements and stuff. So not only are you maybe not doing your seller good justice, but they're also not doing it to get value if they don't have enough pictures.
Oh, yeah, it's so
Pictures are
important.
so important.
For us, on my subject, I get to see it, so I know everything about that. So that's not the issue. It's just that it hurts other agents don't understand. It hurts other people's value when you say it's really great condition or beautifully updated home and there's no photos. I try to tell people, I was like, we can tell that 1995 house, ours has got new LVP flooring, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, all that stuff. And I'm looking at yours, white appliances, laminate countertops, but there's an adjustment to be made. And some people will, like, I've heard on social media, well, he used that house, this appraiser used that house, it's nowhere near as. That's fine. We can adjust that house. It might be one of 2 sales that we have in the last 6 months. We want to use it. It might be the best sale. Once we adjust it, it might be perfect over your sales price. But if we don't know what it looks like and you just, we have to go by what you say. And you say beautifully updated, but you have no photos of the updates or no descriptions of the update. Well, now we go, well, is that apples to apples? Is that apples to oranges? And we understand you're trying to sell a house. So you're obviously not going to tell us all the bad things about it. But that hurts a little bit because we're like, that is inferior to the listing that your partner has over here, that we can make an upward adjustment for that property. So we just go, we realize it's limited with what you can put in the MLS, but if you have, especially like our old days, the living room, the kitchen, the baths, that generally will show us what updates that you've done. Because an update, we've seen pictures, even with pictures going, updated kitchen, and you see a stainless steel dishwasher, everything else looks original.
Yeah.
So updates are not the same with everybody.
Yes.
So
And it's like they say updated, it's like, well, there's a difference in putting in a new heat pump and a new roof and new windows as opposed to updating the bathrooms and the kitchen. So it's like, okay, well, you've updated. I look at these pictures, I see nothing inside the house. What was updated?
So is there value for, I'm gonna interrupt real quick here, is there value for the new roof, the new HVAC?
It lowers your effective age, and that goes into condition overall. That would make it, if you got 2 houses the same age and they're 25 years old, one has a new roof and one doesn't. The one that doesn't within 5 years is gonna have that expense.
And sometimes we have to balance that out, because new roof, new HVC, we got new LVP flooring and a new deck or something like that. So in our heads, we're looking at, it's not apples to apples, but you're looking at the value, the contributory value.
Yeah.
And you guys, they might X each other out. You had these things done, they're not the same as these, but they look about the same. And I said, a lot of this stuff we get as we're doing a report. I know that agents would like to think that we have this magical list. We only use these numbers. And it doesn't, because we will prove ourselves wrong. We will grid comps and think something, and it's like, try not to go in there with any kind of bias about this is better than that, and then you start to, just like we talked about COVID. All right, well, that kitchen's nowhere near as nice as mine, but it sold for the same that had a kitchen just like mine. So I would normally think I would make an adjustment, but the market's telling me that right now, this point of time, there's no adjustment to be made, or a lower adjustment than you normally would make.
And while we're talking this, I saw in here something about adjustments. A lot of times when we put our comps in, we end up with paired sales. Because you can see right here, okay, well, this one only has 1 car garage, this one has a carport, well, this one has a 2-car garage. So you can look and see what the market recognizes, and you can do it also. You look at it and it's like, well, this one's so low, well, it's got a carport. So that means this one with 1-car garage as opposed to the carport, well, that's about $3,000, $4,000, and that's about what it'd take to make that carport a 1-car garage. So it's when you put your comps in your CMA, look at the differences. just look at the differences. A lot of times, sometimes just throw a different one in just so you can see. Because if you've got, everything's got 2-car carports, your subject has a 1-car carport. And this one's got a garage, and you want to know what the difference is, find one that has nothing. And just throw it in there and you can see it, it almost jumps out at you. Well, this one sold for less than my subject is listed for. And it's only got no car storage. So that's the only thing that's different. They're the same age, same size, same bathroom count. Bedrooms don't really matter. And so, well, the difference must be in the car storage. So I'm going to make this adjustment.
Yeah.
And that you can see it yourself. And it, you know, adjustments aren't perfect and you don't have to be if you just come up with a general idea. And you know, that can get you in there, and it may not be what we would adjust, but if you recognize that that difference does make a difference and adjust in, and not $10,000. I get CMAs and it's like, oh, they made a $10,000 adjustment because this one has 2 garages and this one has 1. And then you look up here and they sold for the same thing and they're the same size and same age. In that market, that garage didn't make a big difference. But the agent has made a $10,000 adjustment straight across because that's what it costs to build a new one. But we're not building a new one.
So you mentioned pools earlier, that was one of the examples you gave. How do we adjust for pools and saunas and hot tubs and all of that stuff?
It's a common factor. We go back to what the market's telling us. And just like she was talking about with carports and garages and not having them, you know, we start putting the appraisal together and put, you know, hey, the subject house has a pool in it. You know, the one on, 102 Pine Street and 103 Elm Street have pools, but the one over at 207, Oak Street doesn't. Is there a difference? Ah, okay. Is that 4,000? Is it 6,000? Is it 10,000? You know, and how is that working out? Are the pools that the first 2 comps have, are they really as nice as your subject? Or are they nicer?
Or does it even matter?
Or does it even matter? And one might be really nice and sold for very close to what the other one did. And so in that case, it wouldn't matter. It would be a straight $5,000 adjustment for the pool. And
yeah, and usually about every 3 or 4 years, I'll go in and pull a whole lot of sales and do paired sales, especially on pools. And, I just go through and, because I did it, the last time I did it, sometimes I had to go back and find sales 2 years old where they sold again with and without the pool and figure in, and it's the same way with garages, it's pools, it's porches, and porches and patios, that's very minor.
Okay.
That has very little impact.
So what about, then you said porches and stuff, patios, but what about workshops and garages, especially garages that are maybe heated or cooled or wired, that have 220 in them and stuff, because someone uses it not just as a garage, but as a workshop? How's the value determined in that?
what's the
Same.
subdivision? Out in the country, you'll see more finished garage area spaces, more finished detached garages and workshops. And I see more recognition there for it.
So what happens if there isn't any in that general area? So many people goes in and they pull, they have, collect classic cars. So they have this nice workshop, this nice garage, this nice, and it'll hold, it's an additional 3-car garage, it's wired, everything's good in it. It's temperature controlled because of the classic car. There's no one else in their subdivision or the next 2 subdivisions that have that. How do you determine that value?
For me, and a lot of lenders are like this, and this also helps with any of your other adjustments, bracketing. I have lenders that say, I got a detached garage with a finished apartment on top of it. I'm going to look for one anywhere I've got to go. I mean, in Fayetteville, it doesn't make any difference. I can adjust for location. I can look at the subdivision lot values in this subdivision. It's 12, 15 miles away from this subdivision. But whenever I get something weird like that, I'm always going to have to go find something, and I see keywords: detached, workshop, man cave. I don't know how many different things I've looked for to find those type of things. to at least show that I've got something. And the house may not be similar. It might be a lot of adjustments on the house.
I was just gonna say, so in that case, are we looking at similar houses within that subdivision or that vicinity and comparing the actual home with that subdivision, but then pulling value for the workshop maybe from somewhere else?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
And then
what
again,
that works out to
it's
be
just
is-
like the pool and everything else. How many new car dealers or antique car people are gonna be buying houses in that market that you can price it so much further above everything else that it doesn't sell? You know, the higher you price it and the more value you give to these external features, sometimes you price yourself out of the market because there's so few people that demand those things or would even appreciate it or are willing to pay extra for it.
Well, one of the things that you were asking about a little bit earlier was, do we go back in time or do we go out in distance when we're trying to?
That
get
is one of our
adjustment?
questions, which we prefer back in time or this.
And Jason just addressed that with, you know, when you get something odd like that, we're having to go to. what I
Go
call
where you have to.
The wedding approach, you know, you're getting something borrowed, you're getting something blue, you're getting something old, you're getting something new. You know, you've got to go find that feature and put that in the analysis. It may not be one of the first three comps, because it, like you're saying, it may not be in the same subdivision, it may not even be in the same school district. But you're looking for that feature to put in there.
And just competing market, you don't want, you know, you got $20,000 lot values, you don't want to go a neighborhood that's got $65,000 lot values. But I had a little house in south of Vander, middle of nowhere, obviously down there, with well and septic. Now I gotta find a house, but certainly for any of my lenders are gonna at least want one house with well and septic. There was nothing in this neighborhood, it's a tiny little neighborhood. I went all the way to Raintree out on Parkton Road, which is a very similar market. There's mixture of manufactured and conventional around it, well and septic. And that's, might have been 13 miles away, 12 miles away,
Yeah.
but that's what I went to do to say that these two, to bracket this well and septic that I got, because everything else was county water and septic or things like that. So just, you know, you're looking for that type of house. You don't run into that many weird ones where you have to go find some. And what it is for me, unfortunately, is a hunt and pet day. I'm gonna sit there and try to figure out, how am I gonna find this detached mother-in-law suite? And what they described it as, did they describe it as a mother-in-law suite? I'm looking, you type in detached, you get everything that's detached in, you know, in the area, whatever, but I will hunt and peck until I find something that works.
Mhm.
Okay, so we talked about the workshops and stuff like that, so you kind of touched on this, the land value of the different size lots. So do you make adjustments, how do you make adjustments for some of these properties that may not be, or even may be in a subdivision? And you see most of the lots are half-acre lots, but all of a sudden there's this odd one that actually is a 1.5 acre lot in that subdivision. How do we make adjustments for that?
Well, again, we gotta go back to the market but we also look at zoning requirements and building requirements. You know,
And
your zoning
do you-
drives whether, you know, hey, do you need 1.5 acres to build a house on? Or do you need 1/2 acre? Do you need 2 acres? You know, like R20A?
If it's
You know.
in a subdivision, it's already limited. You can't subdivide it, you can't use it for anything else. So again, it's half the market's gonna want it so their kids can play, and the other half, we just as soon put a fence at the 1/2 acre mark and not even have to worry about,
I don't wanna cut the grass.
I don't wanna do anything back there.
If you look at, you normally find out, and I like to go back to its previous sales, that the person didn't pay, even when it was new construction, more. You can't make every lot the same size, so you got a cul-de-sac lot, and they couldn't make another lot out of it, so they gave 2 lots more than everybody else. They typically don't, the builder's not getting any more for that.
Mhm.
And then there's a lot of times where you get into a back of a subdivision where it was just a weird shape and there's some woods back there, and they were like, we don't wanna pay
Throw it
taxes
in.
on that, we're just gonna throw that into that lot, and at that point, a lot of times we'll just go excess lot, excess land.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a surplus land,
Especially in subdivisions, you find very little extra land that adds value.
Okay, okay. What about then acreage and stuff out in the rural area?
You pull land sales.
So just pull the land sales.
If it's an accessible piece of property, you know, if you have like no frontage, road frontage for it, you know, the guy's got 10 acres, but it's only 1 acre wide. And, you know, the guy, you know, is willing to, you know, give a access and easement to get to the back acreage, well, then you can look at that. But if it's like a star shape okay? That's, you can't build on that. The utility of land
It's,
is
yes,
terrible. Or if it's like a lot of everything east of the river, is it wet? Can you even build on it? Will any of it hurt? And so you might have 10 acres in
But
a
only-
A1 zoning that allows a house on 2 acres.
but the soils will only let you put one house with one.
And also look to see if there's any swampland, conservancy districts, stuff like that. You can see
Yeah.
that in your tax records. They're giving it $500 an acre, things like that. So you might
Yeah.
have, out of a 10-acre tract, maybe you've got 4.5 perkable, usable acres, and the rest of it's wooded kind of wetlands or whatever. Well, then you're not gonna give any extra value to any of that. I try to narrow it down to usable
Mhm.
land versus usable land.
And would that go with what you said? I know you said something about road frontage. So the value of land increases with more road frontage and decreases with
Well,
No,
it's road access.
road
it's
access.
access.
If you
Okay,
think about it, that.
Yeah,
what
you
I
have to
was
take a
heading
dirt road all the
toward
way
was-
back there.
I was in.
What I was heading toward was, accessibility.
okay.
If you have a lot that's landlocked, how many buyers have a helicopter to get back to? My next door neighbor has 189 acres out in Cape Fear, but he has no road access. Yeah, his only way to get in there is when the neighbors let him drive back in. Yeah, what's it worth? I said, when you get an easement, I'll give you an appraisal. Until then,
It's worthless.
nobody else can
You
get to
can't,
it.
you can't, technically, you cannot sell land that you cannot provide access to. So there's no sense doing an appraisal because he's got 190 acres, but there's no way to get to it, so it has no value.
You won't have a lender,
That will,
will loan on.
No.
And that becomes the issue.
So how is the value affected on a property with additions or things that renovations that have been done with permitted renovations or additions versus unpermitted? Does that affect the value?
Not necessarily the value, if it's done, most conventional lenders, I don't know how this is with VA and FHA. If it's not permitted, a lot of times we may not know because the seller didn't do it. Maybe he bought it
Like-
5 years ago.
Mhm.
But a lot of times we can see where the tax office still shows single garage, but this has been finished off with a bay window. Most of the lenders that I work with will say that not being permitted does not kill the deal in any way. Essentially says, was it performed in a workmanlike manner? Is it as good a condition of quality as the rest of the house? And if you explain that it is, and it's normally the appraiser's opinion, they're fine with it. They'll take it just like it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be permitted.
Any broker walking into a property that's like that, they believe the seller says, hey, the tax records don't show, that I've got this spare room that shows a garage, a carport. Well, it becomes for FHA and USDA a safety issue, like unfinished bonus rooms that get finished out. Was it designed and built for people to habitate it? In other words, are the joists spaced properly to support the weight? Was there actually insulation put in the ceiling? Is it built like it should be? If you go into a property as a broker and you ask them about, hey, does it get really hot in here in the summer? Does it get really cold in the winter? And they said, yeah, I'm not sure it's insulated. Then, hey, it might just be finished storage. And I've seen those out in the country.
okay.
So we see a lot of this, especially see a lot of houses getting whole house water filtration systems on it. We also have houses that have solar panels and whole house generators. How is the value determined on those items?
If there's,
Because they're harder to find similar.
okay, solar panels, if they haven't paid cash for them outright, they're considered personal property. Because if they quit making the payments, they will come out and take them off the roof.
Okay,
So they have to be totally paid for. And then again, we go back, like Jason says, and we hunt and peck till we find another system that's paid for and sold and determine an adjustment there.
I have not seen that. Wendy Harris emailed me one day and was asking about listing, and I haven't, and when I find them, I haven't seen a difference in value for solar panels.
okay,
I said, well, there's probably more in Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill, so I put it out to those appraisers. One guy was trying to calculate the savings, over a year savings for your power bill or something like that. And I was like, but most everybody else was saying the same thing. They were like, there's nothing that shows that there is a value because one, the savings are spread out over a long period of time. And what does the average person own their house for? 7, 8 years or whatever. So it's almost very difficult. Water purification systems is what I tell everybody who has one. If you're on city water, you probably didn't need one. Water purifications for the most part are for rural areas where you were on well and you fixed a problem. You turned on the faucet and it smelled like rotten eggs. You need a water purifier. But outside of that, you're not fixing anything. I've seen one in Remington. You're on city water and city sewer. You didn't need a $3,000 water purifier and no one's going to pay you extra for that.
Okay. What
And,
about whole
you know,
house generators?
I've got a bunch of California appraisers on social media. And that is the solar thing out there is a continuous question. And it's like, even out there where it is so much more prevalent and maybe contribute, they don't make adjustments for solar panels. I mean, there is very little market reaction to support this stuff. And then, like Jason says, if you're gonna be there 7 or 8 years, your savings is over the long haul, but your outlay is all up front. Those systems are expensive.
Mhm.
And it's like, so your electric bill's only gonna be $30 for the next 5 years, and you still haven't even recouped what you put out. So it's kind of, you have to look at a lot of different things, not just the fact, well, we got solar panels and our electric bill's really low. Well, you put out a lot of money and
And there are situations where you can actually sell back surplus power to the grid. So it just gets too complicated for you to try to extract a value.
yes,
And I think generators are the same thing. I go, at least it's on one of our MLS, items. I'll go looking for them. But I can tell you, when I do paired sales and I put them next to each other, I don't see somebody paying $5,000 more for this house with the whole house generator than they don't. It just, the market just says, this house is gonna sell probably the same with or without that generator. And a lot of times we talk about contributory value. Does it contribute anything? It contributes to the cost. But when you put it out on the market, and even when we did a lot of these, builders were starting to build really high efficiency energy homes. And they're trying to sell it for $20,000 more than their other same model of home that doesn't have this stuff, and people just go to the other one. They don't really care. They don't R10, R15, and
Like her.
Yeah, just like Paul was saying, are we gonna see it? Will we see that $20,000 savings over the 5-10 years that we're gonna own the property? And the return is not that fast.
no.
So here's the one that everybody gets scared. What is the protocol for an agent to call an appraiser? There is, been things like you can never talk to an appraiser and stuff. So what is the actual protocol?
I'll always talk to a realtor. You can call me with questions, you can call me about an appraisal, I won't go into specifics. But if you have a question, I will talk to anybody that calls and asks. And I've done it for years.
I think it's perfectly fine to call the appraiser, but there's 2 big areas that people wanna talk about. Value.
Which we cannot.
But you called for repairs, I don't understand. Well, hey, I'll go over repairs, all day long to make sure people understand, because when I go out to do a final, I wanna do it once, okay?
Mhm.
I don't wanna have to go back and open up a window for FHA. Nothing worse than, because I'll interview brokers before I go out for an FHA or USDA appraisal, which is one of the differences between VA and conventional is they require that at least one window in every bedroom functions such that a child could open the window, escape a fire. But, they put that in there back when everybody's putting the security bars on the houses. We don't do that anymore. But if you think about renovating, people paint the house, they paint the window frames. That's super glue.
Mhm.
And then we don't open the windows because it's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, we don't open the windows. Child can't get out of that. I talked to an interview. Well, yeah, and hey, my size, Jason's size, we can break the window. I've done it, okay? Not proud of it, but hey, I'm not gonna do that. I use 2 fingers. If I can open it with 2 fingers, I tell the broker, it's fine, it'll pass.
You just have to have one window in each bedroom that opens.
Yeah.
So, what is the biggest information that you want from the agents? Pictures in the MLS, we've already addressed that. Do you have one for, the copy of the sales contract you get from the lender? Do you want home inspections? Do you want, any additional repairs that the seller may have done to the property? What do you want?
I want to hear about updates, renovations, and when they were done.
Yes.
So that, just,
And
you know,
it
when
doesn't,
they just say updated, I'm thinking about the broker that told me, oh, it's beautiful, that you can see the difference in the bathroom. Since they put that new border around the ceiling, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's gonna sell for 20 grand more for that, as opposed to the other broker that said it was updated. New appliances, new countertops, new flooring, and interior paint.
and the bathrooms have.
Condition
vanity.
is the one thing that you're gonna see that we're not going to be able to see. We
Okay.
drive by that house and you're gonna tell us. And then certainly we put that also in the MLS over the last month or so, room counts, because I'm not sure what the training is on agents and room counts, but I mean, I've seen a 1,200 square foot house have 12 rooms in it. 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and I was like, they're counting closets or they're doubling up on the bathrooms or something, so I did put something in the MLS to kind of. See, most of these neighborhoods, you're like, they're 6, 3, and 2, or it's got a bonus room at 7, 3, and 2, and I get 10, 12, 13 rooms and stuff, the laundry rooms and things like that, so I'm not sure what agents getting, it's been so long since I was in a practical application, I'm not sure what the training is on what they're counting as rooms, but they
Well,
are
but
spread
think
out
about-
all over.
If
the
you
place.
walk in and there's a living room and a dining area and a kitchen and there's no walls, that's one room, it's not 3. That is one big room. And sometimes I'm the same way, I've got 15 rooms and it's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, let me go look at the pictures. And see if I can figure out what they counted so that I can change
Because
it.
most of these houses, less than 13, 14, 1,500 square feet, they're mostly 532, 632.
Yeah.
And I was like, so when you get in a neighborhood, you get all kinds of numbers. We're required to put the number that you put in the MLS, but we won't. There's no adjustment, but we'll know. These houses look almost identical and this has got 10 rooms and I've got 6. And I know there's 4 something in there. I don't know what they're talking about, but
And it
that's the
usually
number that
when
goes.
I put in what's there and I make a comment that I don't know how the agent counted the rooms, but I'm assuming that it basically has the same rooms as the others, no matter what they put on the sheet. And that's the only way we can cover ourselves, because if we change it, then it comes back, well, all these other people use the same sale and they had 15 rooms and you've only got 6. So then you have to explain why you did that. So it's easier just to put the 15 and down here in the comments, say, we don't know how many rooms in this house, it's probably got 6. We don't know what they counted.
And so you've been out to the property, in your case, in the subject property, you would know it doesn't have 15, it's the
Exactly.
other ones that get you so much. Is it best if the agent is present during the appraisal?
No,
Doesn't.
I
6 of one, half a dozen.
mean, personally, I
Yeah.
love when they're empty, no one's there, and I
I
can
do
just go out there and
too.
do whatever I want to do.
I can go there when my time,
Right.
however my schedule, I go in, I do my job.
It does not bother me if they are there, and I have some borrowers on refinances that are like, I'll be in the study, do whatever you need to do, and then I have some, hey, do you mind if I'll walk around with you, and I
Yeah.
don't care either way.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, view, we're gonna talk about value of view for a second. How is, if you're looking at waterfront, whether it be a pond or a stream, or you're looking at a water tower, how does that affect value, the view of the home?
It's usually positive if it's, waterfront, on a lake, on a river, if it's a golf frontage, those are usually positive things.
And how do we make adjustments for those?
And it's questionable. I go into so many houses anymore. And the blinds are pulled and all the curtains. They don't look out the windows. They do not open the windows and they spend no time outside. I can see where the impact of some amenities is going to be less as time goes on, as people become more enclosed in a home and don't do anything outside.
But beware the broker that says, partial view of the lake because their house is across the street from the lake front.
And if they stand right here on the very corner of the deck, they might see it through the trees.
View itself is typically not, but we do that, we do have that in the appraisal. Again, it's back to a bracketing. If you're in Baywood, you use One with a golf course, one that's not on the golf course, another with a golf course, you should be able to see what the adjustment is. I normally tell agents, because you don't have to be as accurate as you. And generally, when you go in there, you'll see a tax value of a residential lot on those, and then you'll see golf court or resort, and you'll see the difference in those. And I was like, for your purposes to do a CMA, you can use that number. Those numbers are probably low now. I mean, if you look at at the old tax values of some of these houses, and they're still on $15,000 lots, but they sold for $200,000. Well, we know that that can't just be the house.
Right.
But it's fast for you guys to not have to try to extract lot values out of everything.
Yes.
Is that if you see a tax value on this says 25,000 and it says 15,000 on this, then if you're gonna use those two, that comp, use $10,000.
Gotcha.
It's ballpark, it's easier, faster for you, and the differences are usually the same. When you start getting a $20,000 lot value and a $22,000 lot value, most of the time, we're not making an adjustment. The market said we're paying about the same for both of these neighborhoods, even though the tax values might be a little bit off.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at 35 versus 15, then you know that there's a pretty big difference in
Well,
what.
you figure if you've got a $250,000 house, do you really think a $1,000 adjustment for site or view makes a difference in the greater scheme of things? It does not. You know, we end up with a range down here and we go there and $1,000 either way in an adjustment is nothing. When you're looking at, now, if you were at a $70,000 house, that $1,000 adjustment would make a difference. But you look at it in perspective to the house that you're talking about and the neighborhood you're in.
So when we make these adjustments, and this would be for our VA appraisers, we make these adjustments, we send it in, and all of a sudden we get the lovely notification of time lock. What is the process that you expect back from us agents to try and justify where we came up with our price point at?
Well, we're gonna let Paula address the main question, because Jason and I are not on the panel, but I would like to address a request for revalue. Request for revision value, period. Go through the lender. Don't call the appraiser on it.
Mm-mm.
And you've got to have data. If you don't have comps, if you don't have information that was missed in the report, or better sales that are closer and more similar to subject property, you're gonna be wasting your time.
So when you request for revalue on any type of loan, you're gonna want to show not just, you have to have a good solid reason to say why to change it. Don't just send them your CMA and say.
Well, the
I
problem,
think
what we run into a lot of times is you're not sending similar properties. When I get some revalue, it's like, okay, this house is on market for 3 days, right? I'm using the same comps you did for your CMA. They're within 6 months or 4 months or whatever. I know that you got a contract especially during COVID, $20,000 over that. I was like, but those are still my sales. And for you to go, well, I'm gonna go, they start to send it based on price. Well, I had it for 250 and it's contract for 270. Now there's no 270s in that neighborhood, but I'm gonna go to that neighborhood and find a 275, a 280, a 290. And I was like, these aren't the comps that you pulled when you did your CMA, and they're not the comps that we're gonna pull when we do the appraisal. We had sales in that neighborhood. Don't try to support it with value alone, because we don't search by
So stay away from
Yes.
using anything based on value.
on sales price, just because you're thinking that will support your price, because there's no way as an appraiser, I can go ignore all these sales and go to these other neighborhoods and jack your price up for that. In fact, that's the easiest way to get your license locked, because if you ever got investigated, they're gonna go, why didn't you use one of these 5 beautiful sales right?
Sales.
Yeah, Jason's exactly right. The most current, just like brokers, in the real estate commission puts out a report on, hey, Sally did something bad, Bobby did something with a trust account. Appraisers, there's a couple written up, reprimanded, their license has been suspended for 6 months, 12 months, this kind of thing, because of going outside of the area. One appraiser actually called the listing broker and said, oh, I can get it up from 250, I just have to go a little bit farther. Turned in a second appraisal on the same property for 268 by going completely out of the county for comps.
Yeah, I'm sure you can take it.
We can easily be checked. We're peer reviewed. Everything's gonna go to Fannie Mae's desktop underwriter. Every lender in the country has that comp. They have an overview comp. I mean, everybody can get the same information that we can now.
Right,
Years
yes.
ago, you pretty much had to trust what Jason put in an appraisal because you have no way to verify it. We're using comp books and you don't have one. But nowadays, everything is digital. So if you use that comp wrong, if you skip one and go somewhere else, they're gonna know about it. You're gonna get a little letter back that says, what's wrong with these three that you use in the neighborhood? So there's no fudging it anymore.
None.
So how do we handle the title?
Okay.
Because I know that has a whole process.
As soon as I realize the value's not gonna come in, I send an email. That's the first step in my Tidewater. And I send it to my point of contact, who sends it to the agent. And basically I attach the VA requirements, which are, you have 48 hours, which is 2 business days. So if I send the Tidewater on Saturday, which a lot of times I do, that means it's not over till Wednesday. So they have 48 hours to respond. VA does want their response in a grid. A CMA, you don't have to make adjustments. And I mean, if it comes to me and they just give me 3 addresses and an MLS number, I don't turn it down. I go pull them up and I do my due diligence. But again, a lot of times it's just like what he says, what comes in, they pull from other neighborhoods. They're trying to support their sale price by giving comps with higher sale prices. I mean, I just did one and they had it listed at 279 and there was, what, 25 sales in the neighborhood and nothing sold for over 250. And I mean, it's like, you cannot, that there's nothing that's gonna support $25,000 more.
Now, what about the other side of that, where you got a subdivision where there was some good comps to your house, and then there was this one house that sold real cheap, and you start questioning the neighbors, you find out those people were getting divorced, and they took a loss on that darn thing, but yet the appraiser used that low ball sale to compare it to the others.
Well, he did it incorrectly because
He
it's
did
like, because when I'm grading and I see a low sale,
I don't even.
there's another question. I need to find out what happened with this.
Yeah.
And it may be from a broker. A lot of times I go, look, they bought this as a foreclosure years ago. They fixed it all up. They've already got a house. He just told me to sell this for what I can, they don't owe a lot of money, or they may not owe any money on it. Discount that sale.
It's not a good
Divorce,
sale.
court ordered sale.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
then
even-
there are actually even some where I go, where I don't use because I go, there's nothing wrong with this property. Why is it lower? And this is the thing for all you agents as far as pricing.
Yes.
I go into lit and I go, why? The pictures are beautiful. What's wrong with this house? There's nothing wrong with it. Well, they tried to shoot the moon 4 months, 3 months ago. I mean, it was way up there. And now you're on the, let's reduce this and reduce it and reduce it again. And you almost guarantee that your house is going to sell lower than market value because you had to start, because agents see that. Well, now you've been on the market 134 days. I'm not going to offer your last list price. I'm coming underneath that. And I was like, so price it competitively. But I know that some of your clients are saying, well, Zillow says, and you do your job and you go, look, well, this is what I'm telling you. This is our range. We can be at the high end of that range if you want. But if we put it to the moon, we're gonna start having to, once we start having to stair step this down, we almost guarantee this is gonna sell below what it would have sold if we would have just listed it competitively in the first place.
Yeah, why can't you tell us what the appraisal was when it's short? And I realize it's a VA thing, but my agents ask me this all the time, said because it's only a couple of $1,000s short, we can go ahead and deal with it rather than go through the review process and then be on.
And that's a fallacy of the appraisal process. We cannot tell values to anybody but the client. And
Well, we're doing the client a disservice because if they've got 7 days from the settlement date to close, and it's gonna put it after that, the seller can terminate the contract and accept another contract.
And usually if somebody calls me, like if you were to call me, I'd say it's not very much.
Okay.
I can't give you numbers, but I can tell you it's not very much in the greater scheme of things.
Okay.
But I can't tell you what it is because that's confidential information to the client only.
So the
we
bank,
need
so
to-
the bank knows what the value is?
No, they don't know either because
Well, she
It's a
might.
finished report.
the report isn't finished.
So the client at that point, it would be the buyer?
No.
No.
For us, it's the lender.
The
The
lender,
lender, so the lender, but you don't have a value yet because the report isn't finished and you don't put the value in until you complete the report.
exactly, but you can, usually the very first thing I do is the sales comparison approach to make sure, especially with the VA, because I want to give them time to make sure that the value's there. And then I can send in the Tidewater, and if it turns out I'm wrong, I just go ahead and finish the report and turn it in, and before they even get the email a lot of times. But, and that way, everybody's got plenty of time. But that's the main thing, is there's 48 hours, it needs to be on a grid, and it needs to be good comps. I had one, they sent me 12 addresses. And it's just like, according to VA, I don't have to deal with 12 addresses.
Right.
But at the same time, I do have to deal with it because I have to address every sale that you send and why I didn't use it or why I did. So it's, and 12 is excessive, so I could have probably gotten out of it, but I went in and every one of them were in a Superior, and you can't use Superior. So it's like, they're in a neighborhood that's not comparable. You know, you've got to come up with some. So why did you go to Gates 4 when you're over here in Remington to pull sales?
So
And it's like,
Let me just add on to what Paula said. She's very nice about that. Another VA appraiser and one that I've
Will not
spoken
do
with will say, hey, we're only considering 3, that's all we're required to. The other ones have not been reviewed, have not been considered at all.
So
And
when
they
you
get
send it
completely shut
in
down.
for your Tidewater and stuff, or your request for value, send 3 strong, what you feel are
Yes.
comparisons that
you're
they're
doing
out
the
there.
best job you can if you send 3 good comparables.
Okay, so now here's a question, is the value gonna be different depending on what type of loan the person's getting? So if the value isn't there on a VA loan, would it be possible, or would it change the value if they went to an FHA or a conventional or a USDA loan? Would that change the value of the property?
Yeah, I'll take that. In an appraisal, we are trying to find fair market value. That definition is across the board for all loan types, okay? So we are looking for the same value. Now, does that mean that we would end up with the same value? Well, not necessarily, because with the government loans, VA, FHA, USDA, we have to require certain things to be repaired. And then say the value is X based on this and this and this getting repaired.
So
Whereas with a
two,
conventional loan, you know, hey, you don't always have to get all those repairs done. You might have to get 1 or 2 instead of 12. But if you think about it for a minute, if the roof needs to be replaced, that's a big shot, okay? But conventional might say, you might have one of the things like, for one of the flip, programs, it's hard money loan. They don't care, they want to know what that lower value is. So a conventional loan, hey, it's worth, $15,000 less, $10,000 less.
because they're not fixing anything,
Yeah.
whereas with the VA, FHA and USDA, all that stuff's gonna be fixed.
So the value.
So your
then
values-
appear higher because of the items being. fixed.
Yes,
Okay.
usually with conventional or a hard money lender, what you're doing is coming up with the as-is value. So if it needs a new roof, well, I'm gonna make an adjustment of minus $10,000. So conventional might be lower for the exact same house just because they're not gonna put a new roof on it, whereas VA and FHA are gonna make them put the roof
Yeah,
on.
peel paint and siding and trim and stuff like that, that would just go down as deferred maintenance, and we put an estimated cost to cure. And put that in our overall condition of the house, the
Mhm.
conventional, when that would have to be fixed.
Fixed on a.
Yes.
Okay,
Because
let's take a look at some of these, see if we've adjusted these. What about those agents who go back and remove the pictures once the home is sold? I imagine that doesn't help. Is there any way for appraisers to go back and see pulled images, or do they have to reach out to that agent? So on the.
if they pull the pictures, there's no way we can see them.
And and how can we know?
Yes, I mean, why would you pull the pictures?
Well, I don't know, and the other thing is that you have some that were like.
Dawn with water pistols.
Yes, yeah, because even if, back when they were going so fast and they were selling them like in the coming soon phase, they're already getting a contract,
Right,
and they
right.
go, well, I don't need to put pictures in there, I go. But you do, because
Yeah.
you're gonna have another seller, or your partner's gonna have another sale, or another Fayetteville agent's gonna have another sale, and we need that information, so you just blanked it all out, and yes, it goes in the MLS that you sold a house and goes to your company's statistics or whatever, but we don't have a comp, and there's a lot of times you see something for comp purposes only,
That's a
and then they
waste
don't
of
put any,
time.
and then they don't put anything in there, and I go, well, I can't use it as a comp anyway, you could have just, it really was so that you showed everybody you sold a house, it's certainly not usable for us.
So for farm purposes, you want pictures and the complete MLS, just like when we put it in.
And you know,
Absolutely.
it's kind of like you go, especially with the new houses, you go in here and you see days on the market 0, and then down at the bottom, it's a market sale. Well, it's not a market sale if it hasn't been exposed on the open market. It's a pre-sale and we can't use it. You know, I go through with new houses and I might have 45 sales, and every one I check them, and every one that has 0 days on the market, I immediately take out of my
So even
consideration.
when there are still some price points that sell rather quickly, so it is best for them to be a strong comparable to at least have 1 day on the market. So
And-
you can't use it.
Yeah, they were exposed, and a lot of stuff is because some
And you
agents
know,
may not
1
put
day
this
on
new
the-
construction in.
If
They
it's
call
1
the
day on
pending
the
date the day I
market,
put it in the MLS. The contract was March, you put it in July, and they put July as the pending date, and like this thing's been pending since March, it was a preset.
Mhm.
So,
And it's like,
Coming soon, it can be coming soon in 21 days and then sell the first days on the market. That's not a comp.
not if it doesn't have, if it's got 0 days on the market. And it's like, even if it's got 1 or 2 days, if I see the same agent listed it and sold it, it's a pre-sale and they're just trying to put it in for 1 day so it'll have days on the market, and I won't use it.
Okay, but I'm saying coming soon is out there now, so we can put coming soon, it's exposed to the market for up to 21 days. And.
Usually
so
we
they
count-
want- You
So do
won't
you
count
use
that.
the cumulative days on the market as well, or just days on the market?
If it shows that it was coming soon as of certain date, that's the date I use for it being listed.
Okay, that was good.
Cause it usually says somewhere coming soon, say 2/1/24. And then it doesn't actually go on the market till the end of February and it gets a thing. Well, I count all them days.
Okay. How often are values updated? Pools are expensive. Now, why are we just talking about our $3,000 like an above ground? That doesn't make sense. So how often are the values updated for the items that you give value?
well, we.
Usually every time we do an appraisal.
As the market goes and depending on the neighborhood, I mean, a pool in Baywood may be more, you'll see a little tiny kidney shaped pool like in Lafayette Village.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, at that point, you look at a price point of how much this house is gonna sell and how much that pool is gonna cost to keep running, clean, liners and stuff like that. So in that neighborhood, that pool's gonna be worth a lot less than when I go out to Baywood, where you got fountains and maybe even a little bathhouse or something like that. So they're, as the market goes, they're updated, but it's not like everything always appreciates and goes up, just like the real estate market. Sometimes it's not as valuable, depending on what's kind of cycle that you're in, you know, in the market, but we still always pull it out of. That appraisal is good for 1 day. And so everything we do is based on that day minus 6 months. Obviously, that's what we're going for comps. So the values aren't necessarily going to go up. People may not pay any more for a pool now than they did 10 years ago. Because again, you've got, some people want a pool. My niece is selling one right now. They had the option to replace the liner or fill in the pool. The buyers chose to fill in the pool. They don't care about the pool. So that tells you some people. Oh, you also have young children, that's
Don't
a
want a
hazard,
pool.
don't want a pool,
Right.
so that's why it's just not, you go somewhere like Scottsdale, Arizona. Everybody has a pool, you're underwater if you don't have a pool,
Right.
but you go to some other places, pools are, I've had some people tell me, in the Raleigh area and stuff, that they don't give any value for pool. I've never done that because I've seen some value with paired sales in our market that there is value for a pool, but it might even be negative in some markets where a pool drags the price of your house down.
Okay, so let's answer one more question here before we finish up for today. There was a social media feed I shared with you guys the other day that said that they were seeing an influx of FHA appraisals coming in low. Is there anything changing in the market right now that we should be aware of and take into consideration when we're doing our CMAs to price the homes?
Well, like I said before, FHA, it wouldn't necessarily mean that it's gonna be a lower value. They're just looking for current market. Paula was, and I'm
The
just
current
talking about.
market is declining.
It's, you know, it's stable in some areas, but declining in others. It's not the hotbed of skyrocketing values that we saw in COVID.
So let me
That's
ask
all
you
gone.
clarity on this. So we have a home in subdivision A. There's two houses that have sold in there at a lesser amount, but they've sold in the last 3 months than a house that sold 6 months ago. So do you take the third comps, can the agent take the third comp from another neighborhood that still has the value in it? Or would you take a 6-month comp and the lesser comps in the same neighborhood?
And the way I would approach that is, you know, and what we're looking for is, again, the value today. What's the most current value of the market for that property today? Well, and you're looking at most proximate, the closest nearby sale, and the most similar. So if the other two sales in the subdivision are 1,100, 1,200 square ranches, your subject's 1,100, 1,200 square foot ranch, you know.
And they
yeah.
just sold in the last 6 weeks, there's your market.
There's what you're gonna do. Okay. All right, well, guys, we really thank you guys for taking your time today. They had, the last question that was asked online is if all of you guys would be willing to share a phone number if anyone could call and ask you questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I only have one thing I wanted to bring up because this happened recently especially for FHA, and you mark this down for FHA. The final inspections I go back probably do the most are plug plate covers and outlet covers. If you go in a house and it's a $3 fix, but I have to go back, you've got exposed wiring that I can see, and there's only missing 2. So when you go through you're taking an FHA, the kids broke the outlet covers in there. Have those fixed before anybody even gets over there, because it's a $150 final inspection, and you can buy a pack of those for like $10 of 10.
Good thing is realtors to have in your car.
Or at least tell your seller, hey, let's replace these little minor out covers. The other issue is access to the crawl space and attic. And if you have a shed out back, I don't know how many times I've gone where they still have a lot on the shed that's empty in the back, and it's been a vacant house forever. I have to see inside that shed.
Yes.
And that includes the carport storage, if it has a different key than the rest of the house. Sometimes they'll label them and stick them on the counter. I go through kitchen drawers if it's vacant, because a lot of times that's where I might find one.
Yeah.
And then if you've got the newer houses, your only access to your attic is the scuttle up in the closet or up on the wall in the bonus room. Have that unscrewed. We're not bringing tools over. And you're gonna pay $150 for me to go back and re-inspect something that somebody could have just taken that cover off. So those are the 3 minor things that I see that there's no reason for me to have to get paid to go back out there for them.
And as far as VA, the biggest thing I see is exposed wood on the outside trim. Why in the world, if you see the wood on them window trims and on those corner boards, you don't just take that can of white paint and go through and paint it?
And it depends on what you accept. If you decide your seller is going to accept an FHA loan, then start looking at those things. Because like you said before, it's deferred maintenance, and the loan's probably
It's no
gonna
big
close.
deal.
If the value's fine, it can be there. You can
Right.
have some rotten trim around the garage or a window or something like that. But if you know you've accepted a VA loan and you see peeled paint, you can see wood on that fascia and
If you
soffit or
see
whatever,
peeled paint,
go ahead and have it done.
it's
Because
not
you're just,
required.
I'm going to come back again.
If
and
you got
rather
a
me just come
screen
out one.
porch and there's a hole in the screen, fix it. Unless you just want it to be a porch.
But you don't have to do it at the beginning, because you might get a conventional offer, and in that case, you don't really have to
With
fix all
certain
that
things,
stuff.
once you
But
know you're getting
essentially, you say
FHA
this is gonna be
and
FHA lane, go ahead and start looking at, hey, we're gonna have to do
And
these
what?
things now.
70% of loans in here are VA, FHA, or USDA, so I mean, the odds are not in your favor.
So yeah, my recommendation, folks, always is
Fix
prepare
it.
for the worst, fix it up, and, yeah, it's not gonna cost a lot for a gallon of paint, just cover it, and,
So Frank, are you willing to share your phone number?
sure.
Okay, Frank Leader, and what is your number?
910-977-0978.
Thank you.
Paula Mitchell, 910-303-3165.
And Jason?
910-850-9843. And we're all members of the board, so you could probably go on there and find us as
Yeah.
a member of realtors and get email addresses or any of that kind of stuff and contact us through there.
Yes.
And I occasionally, I probably half a dozen agents that will call me and ask me the same things that you asked me. I got a workshop or I've got this weird thing or something like that. I have no problem telling you how I would treat it.
I don't either.
The more you know, the easier it is for you, you know, when I go out and appraise that house, that you didn't give that workshop $30,000.
To me, it's like if we work with realtors and tell them what we're doing, they know what to expect. And therefore, when we go to the houses they've listed, we have less problems.
Well, and I think it does, we're able to do our clients a better service too, when we
Yes.
know what we're looking at, so I think it's a win-win for us.
I thought during COVID, I thought CMAs were pretty good. In a lot of cases, I was like, but you didn't know you were gonna get a $30,000 over your, you know, mark.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is like, then they start sending me back comps and I go, well, if you think this house is now worth $30,000 more than what you listed it for, then you're not a very good agent, are you?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, that appraisal job did not add value.
No.
So, again, thank you guys very much, I appreciate it, thank you.